The black box. In this episode, we are going to examine institutional operability and the future of safeguarding infrastructure. This is a postgraduate level legal and safeguarding analysis examining institutional interoperability, operational accountability, participation integrity, cohesive debt, safeguarding continuity, and the future architecture of trauma-informed public protection systems through the SAFECHAIN framework, what I call the black box. SAFECHAIN and safeguarding infrastructure and institutional accountability. Let's dive in and examine the future, not the future of rhetoric, not the future of policy language, not the future of institutional awareness, not the future of institutional awareness campaigns, the future of operational safeguarding infrastructure, because modern safeguarding systems are no longer failing due to lack of recognition. They are failing because fragmented institutes cannot safely manage cumulative harm across interconnected systems. The court sees litigation process, the bank sees transactions, arrears, housing sees instability, healthcare sees trauma, deterioration of health, PTSD symptoms, mental health symptoms. The regulators see compliance, credit systems see financial deterioration. No institute sees constantly the whole picture, the complete safeguarding reality within this whole ecosystem. This is the operational crisis SAFECHAIN was built to solve. So in this episode, we're going to explore the institutional fragmentation, safeguarding continuity, interoperability, cohesive debt, participation integrity, operational accountability, and the future of constitutional architecture, which is required to assist the systems so that they can be capable of protecting individuals in real time. The failure of the silo model. In modern public institutes, they operate largely through siloed operational structures. Each agency processes its own evidence, its own threshold, its own procedures, and its own risk assessments independently. This creates fragmentation, and fragmentation creates visibility failures, because cohesive control does not affect one domain, one institute, or one procedural environment alone. It affects financial participation, housing, employment, health, parenting, credit, cognitive, and autonomy simultaneously. It has a massive compounding effect on a person. Where institutes remain disconnected, the burden of continuity is transferred directly onto the vulnerable individual. This is constitutionally dangerous. because individuals already experiencing trauma, coercive control, economic abuse, or participation impairment become responsible for navigating systems that do not communicate effectively with one another. This becomes an impossibility for someone who's carrying trauma. Safeguarding without continuity, modern safeguarding frequently operates through what I call event-based recognition. So an incident occurs, a disclosure is made, a report is filed, a hearing takes place. A risk assessment is completed, but safeguarding cannot remain reactive, fragmented, or episodic, because cohesive control itself is an accumulative and continuous event or events. The constitutional issue is therefore not whether systems recognize harm once. The issue is whether safeguarding follows the individual consistently across systems over time. Without continuity, protection collapses, participation deteriorates, financial harm escalates, and institutional visibility fragments, sometimes beyond repair. So participation and integrity are fundamental to a victim's rights. That's one of the central concepts within SAFECHAIN. SAFECHAIN is a participation integrity framework because participation is not merely attendance, procedural presence, or formal inclusion. Meaningful participation requires psychological safety, cognitive stability, financial sustainability, contextual safeguarding, and operational continuity across siloed agencies. Where cohesive debt, housing instability, litigation exhaustion, and the psychological shutdown already exists, participation may collapse progressively, even while systems continue insisting procedural fairness technically remains in place. So procedural fairness technically remains in place. This actually creates constitutional inconsistency because rights that cannot be exercised meaningfully under real-world conditions become operational fragments. Cohesive debt is a real issue that FCA and Step Change have actually addressed in their reports. And cohesive debt and operational safeguarding need protection. One of the most significant safeguarding failures within modern systems is the cohesive debt invisibility. Economic abuse frequently produces arrears, forced borrowing, financial depletion, damaged credit reports, procedural insolvency, housing instability, and long-term exclusion from financial autonomy. And yet, courts, banks, regulators, credit agencies, and safeguarding systems often assess those harms separately. This creates institutional blindness because no system constantly identifies cumulative financial cohesive holistically. SAFECHAIN argues that safeguarding must include financial continuity, credit safeguarding, procedural debt recognition, and cross-system accountability mechanisms. Because financial collapse is not peripheral to safeguarding, it is a profound safeguarding element under one's human rights. Article 6 and the systematic fairness. So let's address these Human Rights Act 1998 and Article 6 of the ECHR requirement. Article 6 ECHR requires fair hearing rights, equality of arms, and meaningful participation. But meaningful participation cannot exist where institutional fragmentation itself creates cumulative disadvantage, where one institute creates debt, another records arrears, another processes litigation and assesses housing, and no one communicates coherently. The individuals experience cumulative structural harm that occurs to one individual due to lack of connectivity. This is no longer simply an administrative inefficiency. It becomes a constitutional operational failure. The limits of policy theater in modern institutes increasingly publish safeguarding policies, endless vulnerability frameworks, trauma-informed guidance, and equality commitments. And yet, policy language alone does not create operational safety, especially for victims of abuse. This is the crisis SAFECHAIN identifies as symbolic safeguarding. Recognition without interoperability is not effective. Awareness without continuity, policy without infrastructure. The future challenge is therefore not producing more guidance, producing more reports. It's building systems capable of operational implementation within the siloed agencies. So SAFECHAIN model, SAFECHAIN was developed as a safeguarding infrastructure, not simply training, policy, commentary, or awareness material. So SAFECHAIN, the framework within SAFECHAIN focuses upon interoperability, continuity, institutional visibility, participation integrity, contextual safeguarding, operational continuity, and accountability architecture. The purpose is simply to ensure courts, banks, housing systems, regulators, healthcare systems, safeguarding agencies, and financial institutes can identify cumulative harm collectively rather than separately. This is what SAFECHAIN refers to as the black box. The operational infrastructure capable of connecting participation, finance, safeguarding, vulnerability, disclosure, and institutional accountability into one coherent visibility framework. Visibility is the most important part because it helps the future of safeguarding. Challenge is not just recognition. In modern systems, already they recognize trauma, coercive control, economic abuse, participation impairment, and the safeguarding duties conceptually through the 2021 Domestic Abuse Act. The future challenge is implementation and continuity, because without interoperability, systems remain fragmented, reactive, administratively isolated, and operationally incomplete. And where continuity collapses, harm continues. The constitutional question now is, can modern justice and safeguarding systems remain legitimate while operating through fragmented visibility models, incapable of recognizing the cumulative harm coherently? Because where institutes remain siloed, the individual becomes the point of integration. And where vulnerable individuals become responsible for stitching together fragments or fragmented systems themselves, structural safeguarding failures become inevitable. That is profound. So the future of safeguarding cannot be built upon isolation or isolated institutes, fragmented procedure, symbolic recognition, or disconnected operational systems. It now requires interoperability, connectivity, visibility, continuity, participation integrity, financial safeguarding, and institutional accountability capable of functioning across interconnected domains. SAFECHAIN exists because safeguarding must evolve from reaction to infrastructure capable of protection, because fragmented systems do not merely fail to protect, they may unintentionally produce harm through fragmentation itself. This is the black box, and this is Silent Screams, Loud Strength, and the Unmasking Justice series. You have just listened to episode 13 of season 8, Unmasking Justice. This work is not theoretical, it is postgraduate level safeguarding and legal policy curriculum built from lived experience, constitutional analysis, statutory frameworks, and operational reality. It is the difference between knowledge knowing what the process says and understanding how the harm actually happens. SAFECHAIN exists because safeguarding cannot continue to remain symbolic. Safeguarding must become operational, measurable, continuous, trauma-informed, legally coherent, and capable of protecting people across the systems that affect their lives. To bring SAFECHAIN training, licensing, certification, or the seal of integrity into your organization, visit our website. Details are in the link on this episode, especially the Intelligence Hub or the directive. Stop treating safeguarding as an afterthought. Build systems that recognize harm before collapse becomes inevitable. I'm Samantha, your host and the founder of SAFECHAIN. This is Unmasking Justice. This is the sovereign verdict. Stay safe, demand integrity,